There's a particular kind of quiet that comes over a man when he realizes his own family has started counting down the days until he's gone. You don't notice it all at once. You notice it a little at a time, until the day a 7-year-old says the thing out loud that the grown-ups only ever said behind your back. I didn't yell when I heard it. Yelling is what a man does when he's got nothing better, and I had something a whole lot better. Because they all thought I was the dead weight, the old man they kept around out of guilt. Come Monday morning, that dead weight was the man who quietly signed every paycheck in that room. My son just never bothered to check. Welcome back to Patriarch's revenge. Settle in. Smash that like button and do me one thing. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from. I want to see how far this one travels. And every name on that map is one more of us who's been sat at the end of the table. Say hello to the others down there. This crew always shows up for each other. Subscribe and be one of us so you never miss a story. You found the right place. My name is Frank Delaney, and the night my whole family went silent, it wasn't me who broke it. It was a 7-year-old. We were at Sunday dinner, my son Danny's house. Big table, too much food, everybody talking over everybody. I was down at the end where they always put me now. Two's enough to be family, far enough to be forgotten. Then my grandson Cody looked up from his plate. Sweet kid. Honest the way only little kids are before the world teaches them to shut their mouths. He looked right at me and said, "Grandpa, why does Daddy call you the dead weight when you're not here?" And the whole table just stopped. A fork scraped a plate somewhere. Then nothing. Danny's wife, Marissa, went white. Danny stared down into his mashed potatoes like they held the meaning of life. Me, I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I learned a long time ago that yelling is what a man does when he's got nothing better, and I had something a whole lot better. I just smiled at the boy and said, "Did he now?" "Dad," Danny started. "Eat your dinner, son," I said. "It's getting cold." Here's the thing nobody at that table understood yet. They thought I was the dead weight, the old man they kept around out of guilt, the one who didn't matter anymore. They had it exactly backwards, because come Monday morning, that dead weight was the man who signed every single one of their paychecks. Danny just didn't know it yet. Let me back up, because to understand how sweet it got, you've got to understand how it started. I built Delaney Freight with my own 2 hands. Started with one truck in 1979. One truck, a rented lot, and a wife named Ruth who believed in me when the bank didn't. 38 years I ran that company. Watched it grow from that one truck to 40 rigs, a warehouse, 60 employees. I made payroll through 2 recessions. I never missed it once, not one time. There were weeks I didn't pay myself so my drivers could feed their kids. That's the kind of company it was. That's the kind of man I tried to be. Ruth passed 4 years ago. Cancer. Quick at the end, which everybody keeps telling me is a blessing. Maybe it is, I don't know. The house got real quiet after that, and that's when Danny stepped in. Now I want to be fair. When Ruth got sick, I stepped back from the business. Somebody had to run it, and Danny was my boy, my only child. So I made him general manager, gave him the corner office, gave him the keys. What I did not do, and remember this, because it's the whole story, is give him the company. I kept the ownership, every share. On paper, Delaney Freight still belonged to me, 100%. Danny ran the day-to-day. But the man who owned the whole thing was the old fella they sat at the end of the table. I figured he knew that. I figured it went without saying. That was my mistake. You should never let the important things go without saying. It started small, the way these things do. You don't notice a man forgetting your worth all at once. You notice it a little at a time, like a tide going out. First, it was the meetings. I'd drop by the office like I always had, and the quarterly review would be happening in the conference room. Nobody told me. I'd stand in the doorway and Danny would look up like I was a delivery he wasn't expecting. "Dad, hey, we're kind of in the middle of something." "I can see that. Thought I'd sit in." "It's pretty technical. Budget stuff. You'd be bored." Budget stuff. I made 40 years of budgets in that building. But I'd nod, and I'd go get a coffee from the machine in the break room, and I'd tell myself he was just busy, just stressed. Running a company is hard. I knew that better than anybody. Then it was my office. I came in one Tuesday, and my old office, the one I'd had for 30 years with Ruth's picture on the desk, had a new nameplate. Kyle Brennan. Danny's buddy from college. Some sales guy he'd brought on as director of operations, which as far as I could tell meant he wore expensive shoes and talked a lot. "Where's my stuff?" I asked Danny. "We boxed it up. It's in the storage room. Dad, you're retired. We needed the space." Retired. I never said that word, not once. But there it was, hung around my neck like a sign. I want to tell you about Kyle Brennan because Kyle matters. Kyle was one of those young men who mistook confidence for competence. Slick. Always had an answer, even when he had no idea. He'd shake your hand too hard and hold it too long, like a fellow who read somewhere that a strong grip meant a strong man. He called me Frank from day one, which was fine, and then started calling me Big Guy and Champ, which was not. "How you doing there, Champ?" he'd say when I came in, big grin. "You keeping busy? Lot of golf." I don't play golf. I never played golf. But Kyle had decided who I was, and it was easier for both of us if I just let him. I watched Kyle and Danny become thick as thieves. Lunches out. Weekend rounds, golf, real golf for them. And I watched the company start to change. New logo, cost a fortune, fancy new phone system nobody could work. And underneath it all, a smell I recognized, the way an old accountant recognizes it. The smell of a company spending money it was pretending it had. Because here's what Danny didn't know that I did. I still got the reports. Every month, the bank sent the ownership a summary, and the ownership was me. Danny never thought to change that, because Danny never thought about me at all. So while my son was telling everyone I was a doddering old retiree who didn't understand budget stuff, I was sitting at my kitchen table every month, reading exactly how much of my company he was setting on fire. Which brings us back to Sunday dinner, and Cody, and the dead weight. You want to know the truth? I wasn't even angry when the boy said it, not right away. What I felt was something quieter and colder than anger. It was clarity, because I've been telling myself a story for 2 years. The story was, Danny's a good boy, he's just stressed. He doesn't mean any harm. He loves you. This is just what happens when a son takes over. Give him room. And a 7-year-old blew that story to pieces with one honest sentence. The dead weight. That's what my son called me at his own dinner table, in front of his own kid, enough times that a 7-year-old thought it was my nickname. So no, I didn't yell. I just sat there and let the story die. And in the quiet where it used to be, I started to think. That night I couldn't sleep, so I did what I always do when something matters. I got out a legal pad and a pen, and I started writing down what I knew. I knew I owned the company, all of it. I knew Danny had, over 2 years, quietly moved himself and Kyle onto the board as officers, but officers aren't owners. They serve at the pleasure of the owner, and the owner was me. I knew the company had taken on a big loan 8 months back to fund all of Kyle's shiny nonsense. A line of credit against the company's assets. I'd seen it in the report and my stomach had dropped. And I knew something else. Something I'd noticed in the last 3 monthly summaries and hadn't wanted to believe. Money was going out of the company to a vendor I didn't recognize. Brennan Logistics Consulting. Nice fat monthly payments. Consulting fees. Brennan, same as Kyle. Now I've been doing this a long time. And in 40 years I learned that when money leaves a company you built and lands somewhere with a familiar last name, you don't accuse anybody of anything. Not yet. You get quiet. You get careful. And you get proof. So the next morning I didn't call Danny. I didn't call a lawyer to scream. I called my accountant. Not the company's accountant. Kyle had bought in a new one of those. I called my accountant, Sam Okuff, a man I'd trusted with numbers for 25 years. "Sam," I said, "I need you to pull everything on Delaney Freight, quietly, everything the ownership is entitled to see. Which, remind me, is—" "Everything, Frank," Sam said. "You own it. You can see all of it. They can't hide a dime from you." "Then let's see all of it," I said. While Sam worked, I did something that probably sounds strange. I kept going to Sunday dinners. I sat at my end of the table. I let Kyle call me Champ. I let Danny talk over me. I asked Cody about school, and I complimented Morris's cooking, and I acted, for all the world, like a harmless old man running out the clock on his own life. Because here's a thing they don't teach you when you're young. Sometimes the smartest thing a man can do is let people keep believing you're the fool they don't watch. A fool they talk freely in front of. And boy, did they talk. One Sunday I was in the kitchen refilling my water, and Danny and Kyle were out on the back porch, and the window was open. They didn't know I could hear. "You handled the old man," Kyle said. "He's fine," Danny said. "He doesn't know anything. He reads the sports page and takes naps. Honestly, half the time I think he forgets he ever owned the place." "Just checking. Because once we get him to sign the transfer, the consulting thing is a lot cleaner. Right now, if anybody looks, it's technically his company getting billed." "He'll sign whatever I put in front of him," Danny said. "I'll tell him it's insurance paperwork. He trusts me." I stood in that kitchen holding my glass of water, and I did not make a sound. He trusts me. Oh, of all the things I heard through that window, that's the one that stayed. Not the scheming, not the old man. Those I could have forgiven as ambition, as a young man and over his head. But he trusts me, said like it was a weakness. Said like the fact that his own father believed in him was just a door left unlocked. I set my glass down real gentle. I walked back to the table. I sat down at my end, and I smiled at everybody. And I decided, right then, exactly how this was going to end. Sam called me 3 days later. His voice had that flat, careful sound a numbers man gets when the numbers are ugly. "Frank, you sitting down. Just tell me, Sam. First, the good news, if you want to call it that. You're right. You own 100%. Clean. Danny and Kyle are officers, nothing more. You can remove them both tomorrow with a signature. That part's easy. And the bad news," Sam took a breath. "Over the last 14 months, roughly $400,000 has gone out to Brennan Logistics Consulting. Frank, I looked into that company. It's Kyle. It's a shell. It provides no services I can find any record of. It's just an account the money flows into. So Kyle's stealing from my company. It's worse than that. The way it's structured, with Danny signing off on the invoices as manager, Danny's on the paper too. Legally, they're both exposed. If this ever went in front of the right people, we're not talking about firing. We're talking about fraud." I want to tell you I felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt like a man standing in the ashes of a house he built, holding the match his own son used. Because that word, fraud, that word doesn't just end a career. It ends a life. It's a word with handcuffs in it. And whatever Danny had become, he was still the boy I taught to ride a bike in the Delaney Freight parking lot on a Sunday when the lot was empty. He was still Ruth's son. She'd have moved heaven and earth for that boy. So I sat with it. For 2 whole days I sat with it. And I came to a decision that I think surprised even me. I wasn't going to destroy Danny. I was going to give him one chance to save himself. Exactly one. And it was going to cost him everything he thought made him a big man, and leave him with the one thing that might make him a real one. Kyle, on the other hand. Kyle I was going to burn down to the studs. Here's how you do a thing like this. Not with a scene, not with shouting. You do it with paperwork and patience in the right order, so that by the time anybody realizes what's happening, it's already done. Step 1. I called a lawyer, a good one. Not the company's lawyer, a corporate attorney of my own, name of Diane Vance, who I paid to do one thing: prepare the documents to remove both officers of Delaney Freight, effective immediately, and to prepare a full report of the Brennan logistics payments for whoever might need to see it someday. Step 2. I called the bank. As the owner, the actual, legal, 100% owner, I froze the company line of credit. No more money out the door. No more consulting fees. I did it on a Thursday afternoon. Quiet. A phone call and a signature. Step 3. This is the one I'm proud of. I did nothing for a week. I let them keep spending, keep golfing, keep calling me champ, because I wanted the trap fully built before anybody walked into it. And step 4 came to me all on its own. Because that next Sunday at dinner, Danny slid a folder across the table to me. "Hey, Dad, boring stuff. Just some insurance paperwork the company needs. Sign at the tabs." He said it so casual, so warm. He trusts me. I looked at the folder. I looked at my son. "Sure, Danny," I said. "Let me take it home and read it. You know me. I read everything twice." Something flickered behind his eyes. "It's really just boilerplate, Dad. I can walk you through it now." "I'm sure you could," I said, and I put the folder in my coat. "But I read everything twice. Your mother taught me that. Save you the trouble." He couldn't push, not without looking exactly like what he was. So he smiled tight and said, "Sure, no rush." I read that folder at my kitchen table that night, twice, like I said. It was not insurance paperwork. It was a transfer of ownership. Buried in the middle, past pages of legal fog, was a clause moving controlling interest of Delaney Freight to Danny. My whole company, everything I built, signed over for the price of my own trust on a Sunday between the pot roast and the pie. And I'll be honest with you, that was the moment the last soft part of me went hard, because up until then I could tell myself it was Kyle. Kyle was the snake, Danny was just weak, just led astray. But nobody led my son to my kitchen table with that folder. He walked there himself. He looked me in the eye and lied to my face and slid me the papers to sign away my life's work, and he did it gently because he thought gentle was all it took for the dead weight. I put the folder down. I made myself a cup of coffee, and I called Diane Vance at 9 o'clock at night. "Diane," I said, "Monday morning. Let's do the whole thing." Monday morning, 8 a.m., I walked into Delaney Freight in a suit, my good suit, the one I got married in the second time. When Ruth and I renewed our vows for our 30th, I hadn't worn a suit to that building in 2 years. Danny was in the corner office, my old office. Kyle was in the office with his name on the door. And they both looked up when I came in because the old man in the good suit walking through the bullpen at 8 in the morning was not a thing they had a category for. "Dad," Danny came out. "What are you? Is everything okay? You want coffee?" "I'd love a coffee," I said. "But first, get Kyle, and come to the conference room, both of you." "Dad, we've got a conference room, Danny," I said. Same voice I used to use on the loading dock at 4 in the morning when a driver wanted to argue about a route. Now, we sat down at the conference table, the one where they used to hold the quarterly reviews I wasn't invited to. Kyle had his usual grin on, but it was doing a lot of work. "Frank, big guy, what's the occasion? You look sharp." I opened my folder. I set 3 documents on the table, face up, one at a time, slow. Diane had drawn 'em up beautiful. "Kyle," I said, "this first one's for you. It's a termination notice. Effective this morning. You're no longer employed by Delaney Freight." The grin cracked. "Frank, you can't just Danny." "He can, actually," I said, before Danny could open his mouth. "See, that's the thing you two never got around to checking. I own this company, all of it. Danny runs it, but I own it. Which means I can end you with a piece of paper. And I just did." Kyle looked at Danny. Danny looked like a man watching the floor open up. "Now this second document," I went on, and I slid it toward the middle of the table, "is more interesting. This one's about Brennan Logistics Consulting. $411,000, Kyle, over 14 months, to company that does nothing, owned by you, paid out of my company." The room went so quiet I could hear the air handler kick on. That's consulting, that's legitimate, that's—" Kyle was talking fast now, hands moving. "That's fraud, Kyle," I said, calm, flat. "That's a shell company, an embezzlement, and I've got a 14-month paper trail and an accountant who'll swear to every line of it. Now here's what happens next, and I want you to listen, because I'm only going to say it once. You're going to pay back every dollar, all 411,000. You've got 60 days. If you do, this stays between us and I don't hand the file to the district attorney. If you don't, I tap the folder. Then a lot of very serious people get a very interesting story. Your choice, champ." I'll never forget his face. All that confidence, all those firm handshakes and expensive shoes, and underneath it just a scared young man who'd finally met somebody who read everything twice. He got up. He didn't say another word. He walked out of that building, and I never saw him again. He paid, by the way, every dollar, day 58. Turns out Kyle understood money just fine when it was his own on the line. And then it was just me and Danny at the conference table. He looked 10 years old. He looked like the boy in the parking lot with the skinned knee. Dad, I can explain. Kyle, I got in over my head, and he said—" "Stop," I said, not laugh, just done. "Don't do the thing where Kyle did it all. You slid me a folder on Sunday, son. At your own dinner table, in front of your own boy, you told me it was insurance." He shut his mouth. I picked up the 3rd document. This was the one I'd thought about the longest, the one that cost me 2 sleepless nights. "This," I said, "is what I could do. This one removes you as manager, effective today. It puts your name next to Kyle's on that fraud report. It says that the man who signed off on every one of those phony invoices was you, because it was, Danny. Legally, you're standing right next to him in this. You know that, don't you?" He'd gone gray. "Dad, please, Marissa Cody, please." "I know," I said, and here's where my voice changed, and he heard it change. "I know about Marissa and Cody. That's the only reason we're having this second conversation instead of a different one." I picked the document up, and I tore it in half, right in front of him. Long, slow, then again. And I set the pieces down on the table between us. He stared at the pieces like he didn't understand. "I'm not turning you in," I said. "Not because you don't deserve it, you do. But that boy at the dinner table deserves a father who comes home at night, not when he visits through glass. And your mother would have never forgiven me. So I'm not doing it, for them, not for you." He started to cry. My son, 41 years old, crying at the conference table. "But you're done here," I said. "Effective this morning, you're no longer manager of Delaney Freight. I'm taking my company back. You're going to go get a job somewhere, an honest one, and you're going to earn a paycheck like every one of those 60 people out there you were happy to risk. And in a few years, if you become a man I can trust, a real one, maybe we'll talk about you working here again. From the bottom, where I started." "The dead weight, Danny," I said, and I stood up and buttoned my jacket. "You should be more careful what you call the man who owns everything you thought was yours." I walked out of the conference room. I walked through the bullpen, where 60 people were pretending not to have heard any of it. I went into my old office, the one with Kyle's nameplate, and I took the nameplate off the door and dropped it in the trash. Then I sat down at my desk, and I took Ruth's picture out of my coat pocket, where I'd carried it in that morning, and I set it back down right where it had been for 30 years. "Sorry it took me so long, Ruthie," I said to the picture. "You always said I was too soft on him. That was a year ago now. Delaney Freight's doing fine. Better than fine." I brought back the good accountant, threw out the fancy phone system, and put the ugly old logo back on the trucks, because 40 years of customers knew that logo, and not a one of them ever asked me to change it. Cal Brennan, last I heard, is selling cars 2 towns over. I hope he's good at it. I hope he read something twice for once in his life. And Danny got a job. Loading dock at a competitor across town, took the only thing that would have him, and to his credit, he didn't come crawling to me to smooth it over. He shows up. He works. Marissa took him back a notch at a time, the way you should. He still comes to Sunday dinner. Only now it's at my house, and I sit at the head of the table because it's my table. Last Sunday, Cody looked up at me, that same honest kid, and he said, "Grandpa, is it true you own the whole company?" And before I could answer, Danny put his hand on his son's shoulder and said, "Quiet, buddy. Your grandpa built the whole thing from one truck. Everything we've got came from him." He looked at me when he said it, and for the first time in a long time there wasn't anything behind his eyes but the truth. People think revenge is about noise, about screaming in scenes and getting the last word in front of a crowd. It isn't. Not the kind that lasts. The kind that lasts is quiet. It's a man in a good suit on a Monday morning with 3 pieces of paper. It's letting people believe you're a fool right up until the second they need you not to be. They called me the dead weight. Turns out the dead weight was the only thing in that whole company holding the roof up. And every one of them found it out the exact same way, a little too late. And that's where we'll leave it. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? If you were in Frank's shoes, hearing your own grandson repeat the name your son gave you behind your back, would you have kept quiet and built the file like he did? Or thrown it all on the table right there at dinner? And here's the harder one. Frank tore up the papers that could have sent Danny to prison and gave him a second chance. Did his son earn that mercy? Or did the man who slid him a fake folder at his own dinner table deserve to stand right next to Kyle? Head down to the comments and let's talk it out. This crew always has the best conversations. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next story.